Welcome to Saxon Math, Course 3, Lesson 105, Compound Average and Rate Problems. Now, a compound average and rate problem is a problem that uses more than one average or rate. Now, remember that if we're finding an average or a rate, the average or rate is equal to the total amount divided by the number of numbers. So we'd add up all of our data, and then we would divide by the number of numbers, and that would give us our average. If we're given the average and the number of numbers, we can always multiply here in order to get the total. Now it's important to note that if we're given two averages, the total average will be equal to the total of the first average plus the total of the second average divided by the number of numbers in the first set added with the number of numbers in the second set of data. We'll see what this means in example 1. So Blanca bought 200 shares of XYZ stock at an average of $54 per share. Later, she bought 100 more shares at $60 per share. What was the average price per share of all 300 shares? Well, in order to do that, we're going to need to find the total of the first purchase, or total 1, add it with the total of the second purchase, and divide by the total number of shares, which is 300. Now, 200 shares were purchased at $54 a share, and 200 times 54 is 10,800. 100 shares were purchased at a price of $60 per share. That means that the 100 shares altogether cost $6,000. When we add these up, we'd get $16,800, which means we need to divide that 16,800 by 300. Now, 300 can go into 15,000. And we can see we could divide both of these by 100, make our math a little bit easier. 3 can go into 16 5 times, giving us 15. And a 6, meaning it would be $56 a share, on average. Notice that we cannot just add 54 and 60 together and divide by 2, because there's a disproportionate number of shares that were bought. If we had bought the same amount of shares, then we might have been able to just find the average of the two amounts. Example 2 says after 3 games of bowling, Gabe's average score was 88. What score does Gabe need to average in his next 2 games to raise his average to 90? Well, right now, he's played 3 games with an average score of 88. If he has an average score of 88, 3 times 88 is 264. If he wants to get an average score of 90 over 5 games, 5 times 90 is a total score of 450. That means his new scores need to add up to make the difference between 264 and 450. If we subtract 264 from 450, we borrow here and here, which will give us 186, and then we would divide that by 2 to get 93, meaning he needs to get an average score of 93 on his next 2 rounds in order to have an average of 90 for the whole 5. Example 3 says because of heavy traffic, the 120-mile trip to San Diego took 3 hours. The traffic was lighter on the return trip, which took 2 hours. Find the average speed for each trip and for the round trip average. Now, it took 3 hours to go 120 miles. 120 divided by 3 is 40 miles per hour. If we did 120 in 2, that would be 60 miles per hour. Now, to find the whole round trip, we'd have to do 120 plus 120 over 3 plus 2, which would give us 240 over 5. That would give you 48 miles per hour. And that's our final example. As you can see, when we're working on problems with compound rates, you just need to break it down into every component, the parts, the totals, and the averages, and find out which pieces you're missing. Once you found the piece you're missing, do a little bit of algebra, and work through and solve it. Okay, I'll be posting a starred problem video alongside this one, so make sure that you stay inside, stay safe, wash your hands, and do your homework.